Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, Josh, buckle up. Here we go.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about The Irishman, or as I was watching the film, I don't know if the technical title of this is I Heard You Paint Houses, but that was the only title card we had. There was like a title reveal at the beginning of the movie, and then at the end of the movie, the first thing that comes up on the screen at the end of the movie is I Heard You Paint Houses. And nowhere in the film is a title card of The Irishman in there. But when you go on Netflix and search for The Irishman, you find it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yes, we're going to talk about Martin Scorsese's longest film at 3.5 hours long, which has been a huge deal for a lot of people. So we'll have to see. I saw it in my home, and you saw it in the theater. So let's get your take first. What did you feel like seeing the new Martin Scorsese movie in the theater?
Well, first of all, let me say I thought that was a chapter card, not a title card. The paint houses. I thought it was a chapter, like this is the first chapter of the book or whatever, the title, because I think that's the title of the book that this is based on.
It is.
Okay, so here's the story. I was wanting to see this movie in the theater, and it had come to my favorite theater in Norfolk called The Narrow. This old, I was telling you off podcast, it's this old, looks like an old vaudeville theater, downtown Norfolk. It's great. It's got a balcony, and I had kind of looked for it on IMDb when the showtimes were coming to Norfolk and all that other stuff, and it still wasn't showing. So I was like, okay, well, never mind. I'll just watch it on Netflix. I pulled it up on Netflix. I started watching it. I got about half an hour in, and I stopped. There was something wrong about me seeing it on Netflix. It just felt wrong. Something wasn't clicking for me. I was not in it. Nothing was pulling me in. The CGI was pulling me out. I was like, what's happening here? So I said, okay, I'm just going to wait till it comes to the theater, because I knew we were going to do our Martin Scorsese episode for our 250th, and I knew I had some time to see The Irishman. I'm sure it was going to come. Well, I went and I looked in on IMDb on Saturday at 1:05, and it was playing at 1 o'clock at the Narrow. I was like, oh, dang it. But I just happened to check a couple hours later, and they weren't releasing showtimes like they normally do. I guess maybe because this is an independent theater. I don't know why they weren't. Or maybe they switched showtimes at the last minute. I have no idea. But I did notice that it was coming out at 3 o'clock on that following Sunday. I was like, well, then that's when I'm going to see it. I get there. I'm in the balcony. The movie starts, and I'm like, yes, this is much better. This is the way I need to see this movie. I watch it, and I come out of the theater, and I feel nothing. I'm numb. And not numb from the experience, but numb because I felt nothing. And I thought, this is weird. What's happening here? I was engaged the 3.5 hours that I watched it. I was following everything that was going on. Something wasn't clicking for me with this movie. I don't know what it was. So I immediately called my buddy in North Carolina, Jeff, who's a big Scorsese fan, big Paul Thomas Anderson fan, loves Punch Drunk Love. You know, the caliber is set to have a conversation with somebody who says they like Punch Drunk Love. So I know this guy is somebody I need to talk to about it. So I call him, and I can't get a hold of him, leave a message, and I called Chad, the guy who does our music for the podcast. He's a big Goodfellas fan, huge Godfather fan, loves The Sopranos, loves the gangster film. So I called him and I said, Irishman, did you see it? And he said, yes. I said, what'd you think? He said, I loved it. I said, okay, so tell me what you loved about it. And we have a good 45-minute conversation. While we're talking, my buddy Jeff calls me back. I don't answer it. I finish my conversation with Chad, and then I call Jeff back. And Jeff is a Scorsese fan, huge fan. And I go, I called him coming from the theater, and he was at his wife's Christmas party. He couldn't talk. And I said, okay, well, just call me later. And he said, okay, well, just in a sentence, what did you think? And I said, I wasn't blown away by it. And he goes, really? He goes, I'll call you back. So he's getting home from his wife's Christmas party to call me to talk about The Irishman. He does call me. They both made very valid points about what they loved about the movie. And I kept saying, I have questions. My question is, what haven't we seen from these people, Scorsese, De Niro, Pesci, Pacino? What haven't we seen in this movie that we haven't seen before? What's in this movie that we haven't seen before? Why are we watching this story? What is the reason why, as a group of people, what is what's the universal truth or universal theme that we're watching this movie? And I just couldn't put my finger on it. And Jeff was like, well, you're very analytical when it comes to films. And Chad was like, well, think about this, 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 and this. And they made very valid points, but it still wasn't clicking for me. I was like, what is happening with this? Why can I not figure out how I feel about this movie? I didn't want to come out of it and say I didn't like it, because that's not the feeling I was having. And I wasn't having this I'm lit up feeling that I thought I was going to have afterwards. But slowly and surely, it started to take over. I could not stop thinking about it. I knew everything I saw. I could remember everything I saw. And I kept thinking about Joe Pesci. He's getting all this critical acclaim. He's won a couple of critic awards already, New York Film Festival, National Board of Review, I think, or that might have been Brad Pitt, or he's tied with Brad Pitt a couple of times. What is it that I'm not seeing in Joe Pesci's performance that everybody else is saying Oscar worthy? Not that that's the end all be all, but what is it? And then it dawned on me, this is a purposely paced, slow film. But what it also is a creeper. It slowly creeped in my consciousness, and I could not stop thinking about it all the rest of that night. And it wasn't that I was trying to analyze what I didn't like about it or what I was trying to feel about it. It just kept coming back to me. The moments kept coming back to me. And then as I was falling asleep, I was literally drifting off, and all of a sudden I jarred myself awake and I went, Joe Pesci is the creepiest guy in the world in this movie, but I genuinely like him. I genuinely liked his character. Like, I wanted to hang out with him, but he was evil incarnate and never showed it, but it was there. And there are certain scenes. There's that scene when Jimmy Hoffa's dancing with Robert De Niro's daughter, and you see Joe Pesci's character with the two other guys at the table, and he's just staring at them. And it is ominous and it's scary. And I realized I like him so much as a character. I never once dawned on me what an evil son of a gun he was. And he's really evil. And Chad pointed this out to me. He goes, think about Joe Pesci in almost every one of his other films. And he made that kind of thing that Joe Pesci does in Lethal Weapon. You know, that thing, that voice he gets. Nothing is like that in The Irishman. It is the complete reversal of that. And then I watched that conversation that they filmed between the three leads and Scorsese for Netflix. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I watched that.
And they talk about how even if Al gets up in your face, you're not allowed to get there. You're not allowed to go there. And Pesci was like, interesting. You could see as an actor, he's analyzing, how do I go about doing it? Yeah, but if he gets in my face, Marty, I'm coming back. And nope. You're not doing any of that. And you could see where he was like perplexed by it and intrigued by it. And I thought, oh, this film is just set up differently than I was expecting it to be. Maybe it was my expectations. I don't really consider having too many expectations about a film ruining a film for me if they don't hit my expectations. But there was something about how slow this turned just didn't gel with me the moment after. And it's interesting to me because we've talked about this before, where you go and see a film and you're like, wow, that was really good. I'm really glad I saw it. And then as you're driving home, you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Wait, that doesn't, wait. And it starts to fall apart. And by the time you get home, the film isn't half as good as it was when you were watching it. This is the polar, complete opposite of that. This film has overtaken my psyche the last 3 or 4 days. I cannot stop thinking about these characters to the point where I want to put the book I'm reading down and pick up this book to find out more about these characters. So I still have some issues. I still have a lot of questions, but I am completely numbstruck in how perplexed I am about this film.
Wow. I am not there yet. I felt after watching, I think that the worst thing I could have done is what I did, which was watch a bunch of other Martin Scorsese movies, because in the beginning, like at the front of my mind was all of these other films that I revisited over the last week and a half. And I don't think that's necessarily what you're supposed to do. It's one thing if you watch all the Marvel movies before Endgame comes out, and it all kind of builds to a climax narratively, but that's not what Martin Scorsese is trying to do. So I'm taking some of the responsibility and some of the quote unquote blame of not connecting with this movie as much as I possibly could because of what I just did. I'm glad that we had a great conversation about Martin Scorsese and his career up to The Irishman. But I think that I'm too close to those other movies, and especially all of the gangster movies that I watched, is that it's hard for me to, like, there is an underpinning of this gangster world, but really it's supposed to be a character study of these, four main characters. And, of these three main characters, and also I think an analysis, a kind of like I don't want to say like a post game analysis, but a late stage analysis of Martin Scorsese's career by himself. So his deliberate pace and his editing choices and the subject matter that he chose for this film, I think all get boiled down to, like, he's had a full career of film so far. I'm sure he's going to make more films, but this is kind of like a reflection on his career. And I don't know if I was ready for that, because it seems like I felt like I should have either connected with the characters in a different way, or it just seemed like there needed to be a little bit more drive, or a little bit more hope, or a little bit more life in each of these characters. But I didn't see that as much. The performances, you talked about Joe Pesci's performances. I think you're right. I think it's the most understated performance that I've seen him in. I mean, he hasn't really acted since like The Good Shepherd or something. I mean, he hasn't acted in a long time. It's the kind of like polar opposite of his character in Tommy, his character in Goodfellas, where at the drop of a hat he will knife you or shoot you. Or, I mean, I was kind of like going back to the scene with him and Michael Imperiolo, where he's like, Spider is trying to bring him the drink in Goodfellas, and he's like, "What? You didn't hear me ask for the drink?" And then they go back and forth, and he ends up shooting him and killing him, over a trivial thing. I mean, that's the menace of that character. And this character also has menace associated with him. It's just he never lifts a finger. He never does it. Joe Pesci never does anything. The only thing Joe Pesci does in this film is fix Robert De Niro's truck. That's all that he does. Everything else is him talking, and him across the table from someone, or him, in the back room telling someone to do something, and those things happen. Or him being a soldier for someone else higher up the chain. But he never goes in and like knifes anybody or anything like that. So it's a different character. It's a different performance from Joe Pesci. And I think that's what draws a lot of people to his character. And it also, like you said, it makes him likable because he's giving Robert De Niro a leg up. I mean, this is a guy who's a driver, and he is now being brought into the fold and being brought into the inner sanctum of this gangster community. And if it weren't for Joe Pesci's character, then Russell, if it weren't for Russell, then he wouldn't have had those capabilities. And then also just seeing them going on that road trip together too, it endears you to those characters, and it also gives you an idea of his willpower, because he can't smoke anymore, and him dealing with his wife and her wanting to smoke, all that stuff. And I guess somewhat it's kind of cute, I guess, also that they're retirees, but he's still going around getting payments from all the businesses in particular towns along the way. I don't know. It just seems, a lot of it seems a little quaint, I guess. But at the same time, he can, call somebody up and he can either get you on the phone with Jimmy Hoffa, or he can call somebody up and you're dead next week or tomorrow. So that's a complex character, and it's a very understated performance. So I think that's awesome. But yeah, I'm not.
So we're basically on the same page with this so far, though.
Yeah, but when I got to the end, for me, I wanted to have some sort of a payoff, but the way that this film is structured, which is similar to a lot of his other gangster movies, is that you kind of see the beginning, or you kind of see the end. You get a framing device of the end of Frank Sheeran's life, and then you rewind back to kind of closer to the beginning of his life. So, and then you move forward from there in chunks, interspersed with times for him speaking about his life. I did like the transition. Did you notice the transition from the tracking shot that starts outside his room that he's sitting in the nursing home at the very beginning? It's the first shot of the movie, and it comes up on him, and then he it's voiceover the whole time, and then he starts talking to the camera. He starts addressing the camera. I thought that's really cool, which we didn't really talk about that very much last week in our Scorsese episode, but that happens multiple times in his films. Obviously, Wolf of Wall Street happens all the time with Jordan Belfort talking to the camera, but it also happens in Goodfellas when Henry Hill, the Ray Liotta character, is on the stand and is doing voiceover, and then he switches into talking to the camera. He steps off of the stand and walks towards the camera in the courtroom, and it's that kind of stuff where I'm sure back in 91 or whenever it was, like, that's just kind of like, wait, you can't do that. That's the kind of filmmaking choices that are made that a lot of people might ascribe to someone like Quentin Tarantino, where it's like, you can't do that. You can't draw a square in space and then have it blow away like in Pulp Fiction. It's
rectangle. Rectangle.
Sorry. You're right. It is a rectangle, which is weird because she says, don't be a square, daddy.
Which is even better. But that's what makes it so great.
Either way.
The fact that it's a rectangle.
Yeah.
It's so great. And it's a dotted line, and then it disappears as it's great. That's great. I laughed out loud the first time I saw it. People looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, that's phenomenal, people. That's going to be remembered forever.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about it today. So, but at the same time, those are things that it's not like a younger guy like Quentin Tarantino was doing things like that, and it was the first time something like that had been done. Molds were being broken by Scorsese, but even before that. So, like you've said in the past, and I kind of agree with you, it's hard to say bad things about Martin Scorsese. But what I can say is that my connection to this film and the narrative, and especially the characters inside of it, I felt a little removed from it. The impactful emotional moments were few and far between. There's one scene with Robert De Niro's character Frank on the phone with someone. I don't know how many spoilers we can get into, but he's on the phone with someone, and it is a rough scene. And you want to talk about that scene? I don't know if we want to get into spoilers or not, but
yeah, we can go there. There's two or three that stick out that have an emotional impact on me, that had an emotional impact while I was watching it. Now, I will say that it's interesting because I was wondering what you were going to say about this film, because a lot of times we are almost on the same page most of the time. Not very often do we disagree 100%. A couple of times, but not really that much. So I was wondering what you were going to say about this film, and it sounds like you had the same emotional kind of emptiness after walking out of this film that I had. And what has happened to me since is all of the moments that I thought meant nothing to me when I was watching it the first time have come back to me one after the next. So something in this film worked. But what it is, I can't put my finger on, and I'm kind of not going to try because the more and more I try to figure it out, the less I understand it. The more I just let it kind of come to me, I understand it. But yeah, let's just get into spoilers from this point on. I don't know if anything really is a spoiler. There's nothing that I think you can tell somebody that's going to ruin this film for them if you start talking about it. But it is smart to say spoiler, especially with me, because I'll just open my mouth and say something like, who knows? It could be anything.
If you have Netflix, you can watch it right now. So it's a pretty accessible film for people who are lucky enough to have Netflix.
And I will say this. One thing that Chad said was that he watched it. He broke it up. He watched the first hour because, he has kids and he goes to bed at a certain time. And so he just nods out. It's not like purposeful. It's not like the film. As a matter of fact, he said he woke up and he realized that he couldn't wait to continue watching it. It wasn't that he fell asleep because it was boring or anything like that. It was just that, it was time for his body to knock out. And so maybe seeing it in separate sections as an episodic TV show might have made it more interesting for one viewing, but actually sitting in the theater, I thought was important to watch it from beginning, middle, and end, because that's the film he made. He made a 3.5 hour film. Sure. He didn't make 3 1 hour.
It's not a TV show.
Right, exactly. So I think there are a couple of emotional moments in there. And I think this is, and we can go back to the moment that you're talking about. Are you talking about the conversation where he has to talk with Joe?
Yes, with Joe, Jimmy Hoffa's wife. Joe, by the way, horrible. Played by the drug mule in Goodfellas. That's the same woman / girl back then, woman now.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I was trying to place her face because I recognized her, but yeah, you're right.
That's her.
Wow. I love when directors use the same people over and over again. I just love it, especially when it's a less significant part, if you will. No small parts, only small actors. I believe that's true. So yeah, that's an intense moment. And then there's the moment when he's being told by Russ that Jimmy Hoffa has to go. And the look on De Niro's face and how he can, and I thought for sure they were going to cut away to him walking around the corner and having an emotional breakdown, and they didn't, or Scorsese didn't. And to his praise, he didn't, which I thought was really impressive, because that tightness in De Niro's face during that scene where he's trying to hold it all back and he can't really grasp what he has to do. And Jimmy Hoffa's his friend. He's a legitimate friend. It's not just an acquaintance or a business thing or whatever. This guy's his friend. And he's been his friend for 30 plus years at this point. That's a long time. And so that tightness and that tautness in that scene was amazing. And I actually thought that the Jimmy Hoffa Russell scene at the ceremony, the award ceremony, where Al Pacino as Hoffa was saying, it's my union. And Russ was saying, well, but this is the way it's going to have to be. And he was like, no, blah, 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 and he's kind of revving up into his Al Pacino type of thing, but that was still had a cap on it. There's a look on Joe Pesci's face where for a split second, you can believe he actually is a vulnerable human being who actually feels bad that this guy is no longer going to exist, because this guy is not telling him what he needs to hear. He needs to hear, okay, I'll calm down. I'll jump out of this and I'll live. And there's a look on Joe Pesci's face that's just amazing. There's another spectacular acting moment, but it's so minor that I think most people talk about it, but maybe for the wrong reason. And I'll bring that up later on.
Fine. Well, Welker White is the actress's name who plays Josephine Hoffa, or Joe Hoffa, but then she also plays Lois in Goodfellas. So yeah, just want to give her a shout out. The reason why I brought up that scene was because I felt like it was one of those scenes where, I know in the past Scorsese has done films where it's a lot of ad-libbing or just kind of off the cuff, like this is what we need in this scene and just like make it happen. It felt to me like something where he kind of told Robert De Niro, who's kind of known for method acting, to just be that character and be in that situation. And it felt, we've used this in the past, it felt a little Captain Phillipsy to me, where it kind of shone through. It was less of a, Robert De Niro is playing this character who's having to say this thing to this woman who is possibly lost her husband. This is a real thing that's actually going on in the real world. And we're watching this person go through it. And that's hard to do, I think, especially nowadays. And for me, being as cynical as I am, it's hard for me to separate from the technology that's going on and the processes that have to happen to create a film to really live in a moment with a person. And I purposely said person instead of character or actor, because those are the times when I can kind of connect and see how someone might might be feeling or might be emoting in a situation like that. So that was a scene that really shone for me. And I'm not really sure how old he was at that time. We haven't really talked about the CGI. In fact, I don't think we said anything about it yet, which
we'll get there.
But for me, that was not something I was thinking about in that scene. So there were other scenes that it was in the forefront of my mind, but in that scene, I didn't think about the technology associated with this film as a whole, and so that, I mean, that's a great scene, and I wanted to definitely bring that up. But is that like method acting type stuff? Where did he come from? Did he come from like the same background as like Brando and all those guys, whatever that theater thing was?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's so many different techniques and so many different ideas of what works. And my theory is whatever works for you at that moment, use it. You know, we've talked about this in the past where, people don't want to see or hear or read a book or know anything about the character before they portray it, especially if it's been done before. I don't know, man. If I can't figure it out, there's somebody who's taped it and recorded it before, and I can listen to it and I can understand it and I can make it go through me, not necessarily imitate them. But then again, sometimes actually imitating somebody else brings up an emotional center in me. I mean, that's never really happened to me before. I've gotten really lucky where I've played parts of, like the last play I was in was the first time they ever done it in Norfolk. So it's never been done before. So luckily I've been able to do characters in plays that aren't done that much, which is a shame because a lot of them are great characters. And, the one character in North Carolina has been done a million times by people. But I searched on the internet to see if there were a couple scenes from this guy so I could hear how that person was doing it because I couldn't make sense out of it. So I don't know what method he comes from, but I know that they keep calling them actors, and what that means to them. And they talked about that in that conversation thing about how you're not going to get Joe Pesci or Al Pacino to put tennis balls on their face in order to do CGI de-aging. You're not going to do it because they're not going to be able to look at you seriously. Who has a conversation with somebody? So in other words, I guess they want to live in the moment for what it is. So for me, the reason why that scene has so much depth to it is because I think he's really feeling that at the moment. The actor is really feeling that emotion. Whether or not he's really in character, whatever that means, or the character takes over your personality or whatever those theories are, there is an emotional center that happens when you connect with it. And I've always said it's on the page first. And I was thinking about this because we talked about this with this last play that I did where I had that cry scene. And I hate to describe it like that because it sounds so melodramatic, but it was. And from the moment I read that, I had that same emotional response to it. And to this day, if I even come close to wanting to do it in my head, I'm like, nope, I can't go there right now because it starts to flow. And it's either I've connected to the material or the material's so well written that you can't not connect to it. And then the other person helps when you're looking at somebody across the stage at somebody. That helps a lot. But obviously De Niro's not. He's on the telephone. And probably more than likely, the actress is on the other line. They usually do that. They used to do that in old films. They would be in the other room, but you could still hear them. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're not on the line at all. And you have auditions like that too, where you have this big emotional scene, your mother's dying of cancer and this is your last phone call. And the person is reading it from the desk in front of you and they're talking, yes, hun, I love you too. And you're like, oh my God. But it's about the material and what you connect to. So I don't know where De Niro went to in that moment, but he has had more moments like that later on in his career than he had earlier on in his career, where they seem like Captain Phillip moments. They just do. And so I don't know what technique he comes from, but I think he felt that right there in the moment. And I can tell you this much. I know this is true because I saw an interview with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro from Silver Linings Playbook. And that scene where Robert De Niro tells Bradley Cooper's character, maybe I didn't do right by you when you were a kid, and he starts to break down. Bradley Cooper said he did that all day long. Exactly like that. Not exactly like that, but that same emotional core all day long. And that's why he's got 2 Oscars. And that's why he's revered as one of the best actors in the world, because he can go there. So I don't know. I sometimes don't understand the method. I don't understand what they mean sometimes, and I'll look up the definition. I go, okay, I understand that by definition, but it doesn't relate to what I know as a technique. So a lot of times I don't like to learn stuff like that because it kind of confuses me. Oh, I've had a lot of people go, oh, you're a method actor. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I guess it just means that it has to be real in the moment for me. That's what I would say. And I would say that that was definitely true in that scene with De Niro.
You were talking about being able to kind of hear someone's cadence or have historical information on a character. And I know that I saw in there, I don't know if you saw it in the conversation piece that they had on Netflix, but there were shots like stills of Al Pacino on set with, his phone, headphones in his ears connected to his phone. And he was listening to tapes of Jimmy Hoffa or listening to recordings of Jimmy Hoffa speaking.
Oh yeah, I saw
so
that.
He could get the patter, get the accent, which I think he kind of like maybe went in and out on that accent sometimes, but that's, so that I think that he was trying to honor that character by trying to spend a little bit of time to understand the accent and understand how his manner of speaking was. So that's cool that even somebody who's like Al Pacino is willing to to take a little bit of time to do a little bit of research, even though he's got more money than most people and could just sail through it if he wanted to, but he still has quality in mind.
Okay, here we go. Stanislavski, Meisner, Stella Adler, all acting teachers believe in this method. Now, I have studied all three of them, and the Meisner technique is interesting to me because you start learning it by repeating the same thing back and forth to each other, and you're supposed to repeat it back and forth to each other exactly the same way. So if I was to say exactly the same way, you'd have to say exactly the same way, exactly the same way. Right, back and forth. And what it does is, now that makes sense to me, because what that does is it makes you listen not to what you're saying, but what to the other person is saying. Because when you say it and they say it back to you, you're hearing how you're saying it first to them. So you have to say it back to them exactly the same way. It's a little mind-boggling.
Isn't that like a line reading though? I mean, isn't that kind of like what actors don't like?
No. You wouldn't. A director wouldn't say to you, when you walk through the door and you say, "Hey, honey, I'm home." You say, "Hey, honey, I'm home." That's not it. That's a line read.
Yeah.
Which I don't really have a problem with either. I don't have a problem with that either, because if I'm not getting it, you want me to get it a certain way, David Lynch me. Or David Fincher me. I'm good with it, mate. Yeah, I said David Lynch, which is a little weirder, but the Meisner technique would be a practice. It would be an exercise between two actors, and you would be standing face to face, and you would say, "Honey, I'm home," and the next actor would go, or the other actor would go, "Honey, I'm home." And then you go back and forth, and you're supposed to do it. And it's supposed to sound like the same person going back and forth. It's supposed to teach you to be right there listening to the person across from you. And I think that's what this method acting is describing. And the reason why Marlon Brando is the person who ushered it in is because he took a lot of Stanislavski's classes. And Lee Strasberg called him and Marilyn Monroe the best American movie actors of all time, if not the best actors of all time.
Wow.
Which, yeah, it's crazy great. We've talked about that before. Anyway, because he's so real and so believable, it toned everybody's performances in a different way from that point on. Because up to that point, we've talked about this when we do movies from before the 1950s, actually before Marlon Brando, where it's very melodramatic and everything's very like clutching your finger in your teeth, that whole like, "No, don't go in there," that whole over the top thing, because they were showing the emotion, not living the emotion. And I think that's what method acting is. Dustin Hoffman, there's a very famous, I don't know if it's a for real story or it actually happened or it's just become myth at this point, when he was doing The Marathon Man with Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier was supposed to be torturing Dustin Hoffman's character, and it's actually a horrific scene where he pulls out teeth and all that other stuff.
He says, "Is it safe?"
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So apparently Dustin Hoffman stayed up all night, 3 days, didn't eat, didn't drink, blah, blah, blah. You've heard this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dustin Hoffman walked into Laurence Olivier and said, I did all this and blah, blah, blah. And Laurence Olivier turned to him and said, well, why don't you just try acting it? So there is this kind of, let's have fun with method actors, because the Daniel Day-Lewis is a method actor, and apparently he's in character the whole entire time. I understand both sides of it. I understand. Once you've locked into something, it's kind of hard to come back and forth for some people. I've seen some people walk out on stage and do this amazing, crazy, character-driven stuff, and then walk off stage and be like, got a cigarette? And I'm like, wait, that's just not the same person who was. Yeah. I'm not like that. I have to leave me alone. Get away from me. Don't talk to me. And I'm borderline. I don't want to be rude, but at the same time, what are you supposed to say to somebody? Hey, by the way, I'm in the moment, dude. Don't talk to me. But so I try to find my own space. As a matter of fact, the last play that I did, I was having a really rough night. I was scared to death this one night. I don't know why. And I hid in this corner of the hallway, and the woman who worked the backstage, she was so sweet and so kind and so nice. And she just comes up to me, starts chatting me. And I was like, of all people, I cannot be rude to her because she's so nice to me. And I know anything that I say right now is going to kind of sound rude. And she's like, are you okay? And I said, well, I'm kind of trying. Oh, she's like, you're in the zone. What am I doing? I'm sorry. She got it.
Go. Good.
It ended up being a great performance. Anyway, back to method acting really quick. I think it's about being realistic and being in the moment at that moment in time. Mm-hmm. And that's what Robert De Niro does in that scene.
Let's talk about the CGI. The reason why I didn't bring it up earlier, because, I'm all about technology and I'm all about filmmaking and the process of filmmaking. But I noticed it. at the beginning of the film, the first few times that you see Robert De Niro as a younger man, whatever, in his late 30s or something like that. And I started to forget about it. Like, it started to just kind of like melt away a little bit, where I wasn't paying attention to it. And for me, the kind of statement of that, and the thing I took away from that, was that it's not that I forgot about it because I was connecting with the characters in such an extreme manner. It was that it was consistent and it wasn't overtly annoying or obvious. So what did you think about the CGI?
I didn't say it in the beginning, but that's the reason why I turned it off on Netflix, because it was bugging the hell out of me. I could not get over it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's twofold. I've now discovered, I just started rewatching The Departed and rewatching Gangs of New York. And there's something, and The Aviator, it happens in too. He does this weird, the cinematographer does this weird color texture.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, yes, they're trying to do like ectochrome, I think is what it's called. It's a type of.
Is that what it is?
Or it's either that or colorized black and white. That's what like a colorized version of a black and white film would look like. Because they used to do that in theaters. Well, they used to manually colorize, paint color on black and white film.
Well, when you see there's a field that Leonardo DiCaprio's character lands one of the planes that actually crashes, and it's this kind of sea bluish green color, and it's not natural looking. It's obviously they tinted the film to look like that. And when Cate Blanchett and Leonardo go golfing, or maybe she's golfing by herself, I can't remember, the golf course looks bluish green. It doesn't look a natural green. So I thought, well, maybe that's why they look so pink and so flush looking with this CGI, because they're trying to match what they're doing with the rest of the film lighting wise and stuff like that. Now, going and seeing it on the big screen with less definition, it was much easier to get over it very quickly.
What'd you say? Couple of minutes on the big screen with less definition?
It looked like less definition to me.
No, it was blurrier. 4 times as big. I mean, it was 4 times bigger than what was on your TV, resolution-wise.
For whatever reason, when I see something on film, a CGI effect on a small computer screen or on a TV, I can notice, but on a big screen, it looks blurrier to me. It doesn't look as crisp, I guess.
I think I know what you're talking about. There's motion smoothing.
You're telling me what my eyes are seeing.
No. Oh, there's motion smoothing associated with browsers, with televisions. I mean, it can be noticeable. Whereas if you're watching a digital I'm sure you were watching a digital projection of of the movie. You weren't actually watching a 35 millimeter print of The Irishman. I don't even know if they exist, but you were watching that digital projection, which has no motion smoothing. It has what they call judder. If a camera pans or somebody moves to the side, there's a natural blurring with a normal shutter setting on the camera, where it will gracefully blur someone who's moving or a camera that's panning. That's how you can, like, they'll use like whip pans to go between scenes, because everything kind of blurs in between the pan. So that's probably what you're seeing. I'm guessing that's what you're seeing, but I don't know. But either way, that's interesting.
And I'm thinking that if I had just seen it without seeing a half an hour on Netflix to begin with, if I had just seen it in the theater, it probably would have taken me way less time to adjust. Because I know what I saw when I saw it on the computer on Netflix, it took me a couple of minutes to readjust to it. And then it didn't bother me at all. I wish it wasn't noticeable, but it has been pointed out to me by a couple of people that they did notice when Robert De Niro beats that guy up after his daughter gets, that it seems like that's an older guy's body doing that. And there's a couple of times, and they were talking about it on that conversation where, he has to come down the staircase. I think they said more sprightly.
Yeah. That scene you're talking about is a much maligned scene. We were talking about that at work yesterday, and pulled it up on YouTube, and it's a rough scene from a physicality standpoint, and CGI standpoint.
I didn't notice that he was an older actor trying to play a younger actor. It didn't look like a real fight to me. It didn't look like his punches were actually hitting him. The kicks didn't look like they were connecting. It wasn't natural. It wasn't that it was, a 70-year-old Robert De Niro trying to be a 30-year-old guy in a movie. There was just something that didn't connect with the punches for me. So I don't know. I understand why he did it, because one, the de-aging, and 75% of the movie would not be Robert De Niro. It would be a 30 or 40-year-old actor playing Robert De Niro, and it wouldn't be until, you could have Robert De Niro in the beginning like you do. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be Robert De Niro's part. It would be some younger person's part for 75% of the film, and then Robert De Niro for 25%. I will say this, for as much as the CGI has bothered people, I wish they would talk about how great the aging stuff looks, because he looks fantastic in the beginning. He looks old as hell in the beginning of this movie. I was like,
that's makeup.
Right.
Yeah.
It works really well. There's a character in the film. What's his name? Fat somebody. What's his name? Fat Tony. They have him aged, and they actually have him bigger than he is.
Yeah.
As a real person. And that to me was a little noticeable, but only because I know that actor. So I'm not sure I would have actually paid attention to it as much if I didn't know that actor. But yeah, the aging makeup is as phenomenal as the de-aging might not be. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that makes sense. As much as they tried. And there's also something about how thick their bodies are at certain ages. Like when you're 30, you're different body form than when you're 50 and when you're 60. Your body takes over and slows down and gets lumpy, and it just, trust me, I'm going through it. So it just is weird how all of a sudden you're like, why do my legs look like that? They didn't look like that 20 years ago. Well, of course they did, because you're not 25 anymore. You know what I mean? So Pesci had the same body type the whole entire time. Al Pacino had the same body type, and Robert De Niro. And I just think it worked against them somewhat. But overall, it's my least thing to talk about that is flawed for me in this film, that didn't work for me in this film, that I have questions about in this film.
One thing for me, when you kind of look back at the face replacement or CGI motion capture performances, starting at, even if you started at Avatar and moved forward, that's 10 years. So it's only been 10 years since we've had kind of like full on motion capture, multiple, an hour long worth of a film that has motion capture in it as the main way of conveying an actor's emotions on screen. And we've seen it in a lot of the Marvel movies. We've seen it in Star Wars movies. And in fact, the guy who did the Rogue One and other, all the Star Wars movies, it was Industrial Light and Magic, and the guy's name is Pablo Hellman, and he came to Scorsese like 4 years ago and was like, "Hey, we can do this," and he was trying to use it for Sinatra. He wanted to de-age whoever's going to play Sinatra as a young, have that same actor play Sinatra younger. But it turns out they didn't. Scorsese didn't do Sinatra just yet, and he ended up doing this movie. But the reason why they moved forward this movie is because they found a way to do the head replacement or the de-aging. It's not even really a head replacement, but the digital de-aging without having those tennis balls, as you said, on their face. It's not really tennis balls. It's just like little bitty, like I don't know, even smaller than marbles. They're very small. Little balls that you can put on your face to help with the facial tracking, but they didn't even have to do that because they came up with a 3-camera setup that allowed them to capture not only what the camera is capturing, but also they used 2 other cameras that were only seeing infrared light, which is kind of neat. So when you look at the camera, it doesn't look like a normal camera would look. You can't even see what the camera is recording because we can't see infrared light, but they were able to completely control the infrared light in a room independent of the light that the cinematographer was placing in the room. So that's really cool stuff. And the fact that they could put it all in one rig and use that rig even on a Steadicam a couple times is amazing technologically. But that freed them up to be able to act naturally as actors. They just had a couple of tags on their like sleeves that helped with the motion tracking, just to give some references. But that right there is amazing to me that we've come that far. The next question would be like, how do filmmakers utilize that technology in the future? Not everybody's going to be able to utilize this technology because it takes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of people to make this happen. They spent just as much time in post-production as they did in development and shooting this film. The amazing part that I heard, because I heard the ILM special effects visual effects supervisor, I heard him on a podcast, on the Behind the Screen podcast that the Hollywood Reporter does, and he was saying that he got a locked 3.5-hour long picture from Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker a year and a half ago. Like, not one frame of this film changed for a year and a half. And that allowed them to finish all of their CGI moves. Because every time they decided like, oh, we don't want take 5, we want take 6, the visual effects people had to start all over again. They had to re-render everything. They had to redo lighting. They had to do all that stuff totally from scratch. So the fact that Scorsese gave him this film and didn't touch it for a year and a half and just kind of was talking back and forth, I'm like, yeah, I like how the CGI de-aging is working on this scene, but this one, it looks a little bit different. The eyes are bad. They're weird. The cheek is a little off or whatever. He was still interacting with the visual effects guys, but he didn't make any kind of editorial changes for that long, which is amazing. That may also be why the film is this long. I know he said he had a 4-hour cut, but I don't know if that's an assembly cut or what. But the fact that he didn't touch that film for a year and a half, you would have thought that maybe he might have possibly wanted to shave something here or there, but because of what the requirements were, the technical requirements were, that's what he stuck with. So I think it is a feat of modern engineering that this is even possible, and that we are this close to. We're kind of like coming out of the uncanny valley. All the problems that I had with Leia and with Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, they're almost done. We're almost done with that. Like, we're so close. It's pretty cool.
Well, just think in the 50th anniversary of this film, when they redo all the special effects and how much more real it's going to look, and whatever they can do 50 years from now, they're going to go back in there and just digitally master everything or whatever you're talking about. It's interesting to me. I know I just kind of layman simplified all that, didn't I? What's interesting to me is that the CGI de-aging didn't bother me, but I'll tell you what did. His blue eyes, the contacts, Robert De Niro's contacts. Yep. And it wasn't that there was something strange about the de-aging and the blue eyes in the beginning that were just making it hard for me to look at him a little bit. It almost like his eyes were squinting, or just the way, I don't know, something about it. Maybe the way that they had to erase the wrinkles under his eyes or something made his eyes look slinty.
That's not a word.
But I didn't.
What's slinty
I know it's not
mean?
a word. You know what I mean. Like what's the word I'm looking for?
Slanted?
Slits. Slitty.
Oh, okay.
Slitty? Is that a word? Slinty. Put it in the dictionary of Paul makes up words.
Okay.
Is one a podcast. We could have a contest on how many people can spell them correctly, because I couldn't. They look like half of what they should. They didn't look open all the way. Okay. But on the big screen, it didn't bother me at all. And so I don't know if it's something to do with the way it looks on the computer or on the TV that made it look like that to me, but it bothered me. And he kind of utilizes it, because there's a flash still shot of him and Pacino, I think. And his blue eyes are bright as hell when they go to that flash shot. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. There is a still frame of a flash camera thing. Yeah.
Thingy. That's
a word.
Okay to use. Is thingy really a word? Sure. Or is it just something we've made up? Really? You know all the words, Josh. All the words ever made.
I did get 4th place in my 5th grade spelling bee. So
4th place?
Yeah, 4th place. I was better than most of the people in my 5th grade.
I was the first knocked out of my 7th grade spelling bee. So what does that tell you? Thingy, a person or thing whose name one has forgotten, does not know, or does not wish to mention. Noun, informal, thingy. So you are correct, Josh. You win the prize. But the point is that none of that stuff affected me to the point where any technique that he uses in this film affected me, where it stopped me from buying into what I was watching. So I wish on some level I could say, well, the CGI pulled me out and I couldn't connect with it, or his slinty eyes pulled me out and I couldn't connect with it. But that's none of it. There is something, and like I said, it's slowly creeping in, but there's a disconnect between what I saw and what I guess everybody else sees. So that brings me to the question of, what is it that everybody's going crazy about for this film? Because it's like 94% on Metacritics. I mean, that's like almost everybody loved it type of thing.
I don't know. Nobody that I talked to at work felt that way. I was having to defend. I also heard I really felt that Anna Paquin should have had more lines, should have been talking more. And it's like, that's antithetical to the point of her character. The reason why her character doesn't talk is because she's afraid of saying anything to her dad, because he's going to beat up anybody who she says anything about.
Yep.
So if she talked more, her character is pointless.
Right. Be careful what you say. Children are listening. That's all you need to know. Somebody is watching you. Somebody is holding you accountable, and you don't even know it. And that's the third best acting moment in the film for me, is when she does finally speak. All she has to say is, "Why haven't you called Joe?" And I think she kind of repeats that same question.
Well, he says,
but it's a little bit shortened.
What? What'd you say? And then she repeats it.
Yeah. It's masterful what she does with her eyes throughout that whole entire film. It really is. And this whole thing about giving people more lines and need to speak more and all this other stuff they're missing the point of that. You said it as well as anybody could. So are you saying that people really like this film and that you differ from them? Or are you saying that?
No, I'm saying that it was just the comments that I was getting were like, it's super long, and nobody really, I don't know, we didn't really talk too much about the CGI, the de-aging, but we did talk about that scene, the fight scene, because in the fight scene, you're right, the choreography's a little rough, and it's a static shot, so there's no motion to help to cover over some of those rough spots. And then just even like when he throws him out the door and he breaks the window or breaks the glass in the door, that glass is CGI, and it's really bad CGI glass. Like the reflections aren't good. It's just rough.
It's weird, right?
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah. So that was the kind of stuff we were talking about just at work. But I mean, I'm also talking about it to creative services producers who do match moving and keyframe animations and that type of stuff. So they're super sensitive to those things, and they have an eagle eye for bad CGI. And so the fact that it's in a whatever $200 million film and it looks like that, I mean, come on, maybe spend the extra $500.
Spell Slinty.
Oh man, Slinty.
A guy or a girl who sleeps around a lot. Is Nicole the Slinty one, or is it Jessica? Slinty is a word.
All right. Well, you win.
Woo, woo. This goes for the 7th grade person first knocked out a spelling bee. No, sometimes I hear words and I think they're really words and I make them up. I totally know I do that, but I was like, wait a second. That word exists.
The problem is you were calling Robert De Niro's eyes slutty.
Okay, can you just give me a second and let me absorb into the fact that it was a word before you go right there? Because as soon as it started coming out of your mouth, I was like, damn, I didn't use it right, though.
No, you didn't. That's okay,
Why
though.
do you think I sat down first? I was like, yes, I'm going to eat my ho-hos and nobody's going to know. I'm going to watch these smart people spell these words. I'm going to eat my ho-ho. I don't care about this. Anyway, sometimes it just got to be rightus. It's just a thing, man. It's the thing. So what's fascinating to me is I said to my buddy Jeff and Chad, I said, I think this is the type of film when it finally gets around to people, the general public, people are going to be like, it's long. I don't get it. I don't connect to it. Blah, blah, blah. Everything that I was feeling when I came out. And they did not disagree with that. They were like, yeah, I could see how this might not be for the general public. And it might not be for people who might have a conception of what they think Scorsese is. And in a way, I think that's a compliment. The fact that he is so reserved and so held back and so restrained, and there's so much subtlety to this film, I think is a compliment. But I'm wondering how much of an effect of loving Scorsese has influenced and loving De Niro and Pesci and Pacino, and finally seeing Pacino in a proper film with Robert De Niro, having proper scenes where it's just not one scene where they connect in one movie where you see them a bunch of other times where they're not connected. And then all of a sudden you see them together for that brief scene in Heat. Is that what that's called?
Yep.
Michael Mann, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a proper movie with 2 great American actors in proper scenes, and they are phenomenal. I think that there's like a Scorsese effect, that people are so in love with him and in love with what he does that they are interjecting things into this movie that I'm not sure are there or I'm not getting. It's interesting because wasn't Jeff, I can't remember if it was one of them or maybe it was a thought I had after the phone conversations where I said, well, okay, so it's starting to creep into my subconscious and I'm thinking about it, but the ultimate test for me is, do I ever want to see this movie again? And my immediate response was yes, I do. Because both Jeff and Chad said, oh, watch it again before you have your podcast. And I said, no, I don't think I can. I don't think I want to watch it again. And then I text Jeff the next day. I said, Pesci's kind of creeping in on me. This is a slow creeper. It's creeping on me. Maybe I'll watch some scenes from it. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to watch it again. Something about it right now, I'm not ready for it again. But I'm wondering in a year, in 2 years, 3 years, because I've said this before, there's been, Academy Award winning performances where I go, I don't get it. And then I watch the movie again and I go, oh, what didn't I see the first time? I see it now. So maybe that's what this film is going to be like for me. So do you think you will watch it again? Do you want to watch it again? Do you have a desire to watch it again?
I think I will watch it again. Right now, I don't want to watch it again, and I don't have a desire to watch it again. But I think at some point I will watch it again. And by the way, if you want to see Robert De Niro and Al Pacino in a film together for the whole film, you should watch Righteous Kill from 2008. It's about 2 veteran New York City detectives who work on a case of serial executions of criminals who escaped justice. It looks like a horrible movie, but I have not seen it, so I can only tell you what I perceive.
And they're both in that together?
Oh yeah, the whole. It looks like they're in the whole movie together. So, yeah,
I don't know anything about it.
I remember when it came around a while ago because they were touting it as like a big thing that they were both in a movie together, like in scenes together, unlike Heat where they were only in 2 scenes together pretty much. So it's not. I think it's more of like a De Niro, Pacino, Scorsese, Pesci, all in one film. Harvey Keitel is back for a couple scenes. So we haven't talked about the other character actors in this film that he's worked with in the past. Most recently, he worked with Bobby Cannavale and Ray Romano in Vinyl, and both of those guys are in this film. So they've got a handful of scenes, and they seemed to be just fine.
I am perplexed that this movie is being praised to be his next Academy Award winning film. They're saying this is the best picture of the year. This is Scorsese's second Oscar. This is De Niro's nomination. Joe Pesci's going to be nominated, and they all have won certain awards so far, with the exception of Robert De Niro, who just did not get a Golden Globe nomination, which was fascinating.
But Robert De Niro, I was listening to a podcast about, it's The Big Picture. The Ringer does this podcast, and it's specifically about award shows and things about award shows. Robert De Niro has been vocal about his dislike of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. So they probably don't want to honor somebody who doesn't like them. So that's probably why they didn't.
Well, I think that's bogus. Then they shouldn't have it. Then grow up, because that's life. I mean, you're gonna find. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who, you don't like as people, but when they do their job well, you praise them for it. I mean, you don't hang out with them, and you don't go and drink with them, and you don't, bring your kids over to play with their kids, but you definitely praise them for good jobs. So that to me is ridiculous.
But if they say you're a piece of crap, then you probably don't want to interact with them at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm so used to people lying and fibbing and tattletaling and talking behind people's back and saying things that aren't existing in the small world of acting that I've been involved in, that it's just a waste of time. And it doesn't change what I saw on stage. You're right. I don't want to hang out with them. I'm not going to go over and have a conversation with them. I don't want to be at a party next to them. I won't have a conversation if they don't like me, and I know they don't like me, but that's not going to stop me from saying that was an amazing performance. And if I had some kind of vote on whether or not that person should win an award for it, that's, I guess, when I'm Robert De Niro and I'm the Hollywood Foreign Press, I'll let you know how I really feel about it. But here's what I'll say. I'm sure it's going to be nominated for all of those awards, and I'm hoping that Al Pacino is the one nominated, because in my opinion, he's the one who puts in the performance that was the most enthralling to me. I was intrigued by him. I know Jimmy Hoffa by legend and by some history, and he does have that awful haircut, by the way. He doesn't really look like him, but I thought I was watching Jimmy Hoffa. Now, it does teeter into Pacino land in some points, but it's also very restrained in some places where it's not very Pacino. So I thought his performance, there's something about it. And maybe because it's a little bit more over the top, or much more over the top than most of the performances in this movie, that I'm thinking he is award worthy. But honestly and truthfully, if it didn't show up on anybody's top 10 list this year, I would not be surprised. I would be perplexed, because it is a Scorsese film, and I'm wondering what it is that I didn't connect to it. And I'm wondering why all of these critics who have the chance to write about films like this did connect to it and are praising it, but now it's starting to filter through the general public, and most people are kind of on the same level that you and I are. And I'm hoping it's one of those movies where I watch it again in 5 years and I go, oh my, like I didn't get this at all the first time I watched it. My instinct is that that's probably not the truth, but there is enough about this film that I was intrigued about that kept me thinking about it for the last 2 days. So that said, I mean, you should see it if you like movies.
Yeah. Well, and maybe we're just too pedestrian compared to all these people who have it as their number one film of the year. But at the same time,
I'm sorry, you're what?
Pedestrian.
Yeah, don't say me. I'm not. I'm not.
But
you can be, but I'm not.
But I guess it's just like, I don't feel like that's the case though. I feel like we look at film from multiple angles. We're kind of picking it up and rotating it and putting it back down, and trying to figure out what the motivations of the filmmakers, everyone associated with the film, actors included, are trying to do with this film. And we don't just like give it a glancing blow and say like, I don't get it, and then move on. We're trying to like, kind of figure this stuff out. So the fact that we're spending this time and energy to do this, and at least I think you're, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, I think you're farther along than I am with analyzing it and with processing it. I still feel like there's a disconnect for me. So that's rough, because there was a lot of anticipation for this film, and yeah, I kind of feel left out in some ways, but that's okay. I've got so many other Scorsese films that I love, so I'm happy. I'll just watch Wolf of Wall Street again.
Amen.
You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.